Hello everybody, and welcome back to Sinister Minds. I'm your host, Sugar. Today, well, we're gonna take a little different approach with this video. I drove 3 hours to Farwell, Michigan. I got to the home. The owner, who currently lives there today, said that the family doesn't want anything to do with any documentaries or anything about what happened that day. He also said there were no ghosts. I said I wasn't here for the ghosts. But you can definitely tell that this tragedy affected a lot of people. And they said that the police department, nobody wants to talk about it, because that was my plan. My plan was to go to the police department, see if anybody had worked that case, that was still alive, because this was 40 plus years ago. I wanted to try to find out where they may be buried, and he said the family wants nothing to do with it. Nobody in the town or the city does. So I have to respect those wishes. He did not let me film in front of the house either, so we're just gonna take a different approach. He didn't want me to do any up close drone footage or anything, but I did get some beautiful fall footage. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. There may be a structure in between those beautiful fall colors. But anyway, I'm gonna respect his wishes. I'm gonna respect the family's wishes. I still wanna take the time to talk about this crime, because to me, crime documentaries aren't all about all the hoopla and wanting to talk about it. I think that a lot of the times it's to remember these people that lost their lives too. And they shouldn't be forgotten, no matter how much time has passed. I understand that the terror and the horror of the situation is something that people don't want to continue to look at. But their lives still should be remembered. So that's what we're gonna do today. I hope you enjoy it, and welcome back. I do want to say before I start this video, while driving down the road, I did take some video of the home. I talked to a neighbor. She said if I did knock on his door that he was a kind man. She actually remembers the murders. They actually lived in town, so she remembers everything. She actually told me that one of the ladies that found them, after Robert did all that, if she would have went sooner to the reunion, she would have been a victim as well, and she was currently pregnant. So thank God for that. And also the family members took in the 15-month-old baby that survived. So he also said that he's basically saying don't go asking questions, because nobody's gonna, other than the neighbor. She said she's not sure where they're buried. I don't think I want to go in town and ask where they're buried, because it seems like it's a very touchy subject, and I don't blame them. This is a small town. So I just wanted to let you guys know before I started this episode that, yeah, that's it. I'm standing on Rock Road, just outside the town of Farwell, Michigan. 40 years ago, this road became a site of one of Michigan's most deadly family murders. It was carried out by a man named Robert Lee Haggart. Today, we'll retrace what happened, how it happened, and why it happened, and how a small community has not forgotten.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report from News 5.
It may be the most senseless tragedy to have ever hit Clare County, Michigan.
At least 6 people have been killed in Clare County.
The road leading to the home of Mr. and Mrs. George Post was cordoned off throughout the night. Near dawn, the gruesome story began to unfold. Here in a house in Surrey Township near the village of Lake, 7 people had been shot to death around 6 o'clock last night. 3 of them were only...
On February 16, 1982, Robert Haggart took a bus to Farwell. He was armed and angry. He arrived at the Post family home between 5 and 6:30 p.m. Inside were 7 family members: Garnetta, her parents George and Vaudrey Post, her sister Helen, or Wilma, depending on sources, and 3 young children. According to the prosecution, Haggart used a 20-gauge shotgun and a .38 caliber nickel-plated Smith & Wesson revolver. What happened next was brutal. Robert opened fire, killing his estranged wife, her parents, her sister, and 3 out of the 4 of her sister's young children. There was only 1 survivor. Here on this driveway, investigators found the slain bodies and the tracks in the snow. They say the trucks and the dogs were outside. Imagine, it's a cold February evening, a farm that looked like any other, and then what unfolded is unimaginable. Neighbors described the scene as silent at first, then the discovery. Garnetta and her mother found dead in the kitchen. The sister and the children arrived minutes later and found horror waiting. The shots had ended, but the grief had begun. In the quiet countryside outside of Farwell, Michigan, a small farmhouse once stood as a symbol of family and simplicity. But on a cold February morning in 1982, that peace was shattered. 7 lives were taken in a brutal act of violence, a massacre that stunned the entire state.
Couldn't believe it. How could something like that happen in a little town?
Police described the scene as almost unreal. A family wiped out in seconds. The shooting shocked the small Clare County community. For a town where everyone knew everyone, the idea that such violence could come from within, from one of their own, was unimaginable. At around 5 p.m., George had gone down to the basement, and unbeknownst to him, waiting in the basement was Robert Haggart. Robert was holding one of George's shotguns, and Robert shot George Post, and he fell to the ground dead. Now at this point, it's believed that this is when Helen heard a commotion, and then she heard gunshots, and then she immediately took her kids and ran out of the house. They ran to the pickup truck, and her intent, obviously, as their mother, was to flee the area because she was scared, her kids were scared, and she wanted to protect them. But unfortunately, Robert saw this. He ran out of the farmhouse. He was armed with a shotgun in one hand and a handgun in the other. He pointed both guns at the truck with all of them inside and began to fire. The truck was riddled with bullets. At this point, blood was pouring out of the truck. Robert decides to take some clean snow and cover up the bloody snow to make it look like nothing happened. He then goes back into the house, into the kitchen. He turns off all the lights, and he sits there and waits. Because at this point, Garnetta and her mom were still out getting some last-minute groceries. When they walked into the house after returning, they turned on the lights, saw Robert, and Robert opened fire on both of them. Both Audrey and Garnetta were shot dead. Then Robert steals Vaudrey's car, and he flees the scene. And shortly, a few minutes after that, one of George Post's other daughter, Alice, arrives to the farmhouse with her family to join on the reunion, and that's when the bloody massacre was discovered. They panicked and they called 911 immediately. When the police arrive, they find more bodies. They find George Post just at the foot of the stairs of the basement, and then in the pickup truck outside the house, they find 4 more bodies. Helen and 3 of her 4 children had been shot dead in the truck, and they were all slumped over. 10-year-old Angela, 8-year-old Tom, and 7-year-old Amy. They were deceased, but lying on the floor of the truck was a 15-month-old baby. The baby was still alive. She was actually unharmed, but she was covered head to toe in the blood of her mother and her siblings. Her mother was laying on top of her, and it's believed that Helen had done that obviously on purpose to try to shield her children from the bullets. Unfortunately, it did not work for all of her children, but did save the life of one. The baby basically had her arms around one of the sisters, clutching her tightly. The 57-acre farm now was known to the world as the Rock Road Massacre. Robert Haggart, like I said before, had stole Audrey's vehicle. He drove all the way back to Tennessee, where he actually stopped at a restaurant, and it was owned by his friend and his roommate. So he just goes there to talk and eat after he just brutally murdered 7 people. So the roommate, slash friend, notices the vehicle that he showed up in, and what was also playing on the TV was the current news report about the Rock Road Massacre. So this showed the victims' faces and showed the stolen vehicle, which he had recognized that Robert pulled up to the restaurant in. So the friend calls the police. So Robert immediately leaves the restaurant and begins to speed away. Police are already setting up roadblocks to catch Robert. He got stuck at one of the roadblocks and tried to back up. But of course, there was a massive amount of officers right there, stopping him, armed to the T, ready to arrest him. Police would eventually find a pair of bloody jeans at Robert Haggart's house, and the blood on the jeans apparently had some blood type that was very rare, which just happened to match one of the victims. They also found a pair of blood-stained boots in his apartment. When they questioned him, he admitted what he had done, a calculated act of revenge against the woman who had left him. He waived extradition the next day and was brought back to Michigan for trial.
The killing of 7 members of the Post family on Rock Road started with a multi-state manhunt.
Good evening, everyone. A manhunt is underway.
Just 2 days went by before main suspect, Robert Lee Haggart, was arrested.
Good evening. News 5 has learned that authorities have arrested Robert Haggart. He was reportedly picked up in Tennessee.
And when people around Farwell heard the news that Robert Haggart had been arrested, some reacted with relief and some with rage.
Ultimately, Haggart was found guilty on multiple counts of first-degree murder, assault with intent to commit murder, and felony firearm offenses. Judge Gillespie sentenced him to 7 life sentences, plus additional years, declaring that Haggart had proved that civilization is a veneer and that there still hides the bestiality of Attila the Hun. Haggart died in prison on November 21st, 2003 of natural causes. In a civil suit, survivors of the Post family obtained a judgment of $36 million against him in 1986.
Several days of jury deliberations ended in a guilty conviction for Haggart.
That quiet, that tense. I remember the jury foreman, the hands were shaking when they read the verdict. There is no more severe sentence in the state of Michigan than what he got.
He would spend time at Kinross Correctional Facility in the UP. Dave McMillan was a corrections officer there.
He was on the floor that I was working every day.
The two got close.
I don't know why, but just out of the blue, I said to him, "How could you do it, Bobby?" And he said, "Do what, Mac?" And he's laughing. I said, "How could you kill the kids?" And he looked kind of stunned and waited for a second. He said, "The ball was rolling and I couldn't stop it." And I said, "You mean you couldn't leave any witnesses alive that could speak?" And he says, "Yeah."
As of 2025, the Rock Road Massacre remains the third largest mass murder in Michigan's history, behind only the 1927 Bath School disaster and the 1971 Hazelwood Massacre. The small village of Farwell, then roughly 700 residents, was never quite the same. For the community, the farm still remains, the fields are still claimed, but the memory lives, the victims' names live, and the stories are repeated to new generations. Here and now on this land, it's extremely quiet. But quiet doesn't mean forgotten. The echoes of those lives, the children, the family members, still live on, and their echoes can still be heard. I don't advise you to come here, because obviously the homeowner and the family don't want anything to do with this, and it's understandable. So, I wouldn't even say come here and tread lightly. I would just leave them be. Respect and honor their wishes. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Farwell Murders, aka the Rock Road Massacre. If you found this video meaningful and interesting, please consider subscribing to the channel for more exciting true crime explorations, where I try to visit the actual murder scenes in real life, real time. Remember, these aren't just crime scenes. These are people's homes, places where they took their last breath. And they should never be forgotten. Let's honor the victims by remembering their lives and not just their deaths. Until next time.